Rain hammered the leaves so hard, it sounded like 1,000 fingers snapping at once. Under the triple canopy, there was almost no light. Just a gray smear where the jungle swallowed the sky. The troop moved in a tight file along a steep ridgeline, boots searching for rock that would not slide. Nobody spoke, because, in this kind of terrain, one careless sound could carry farther than you ever meant it to. CW2 Emily Knox Carter kept her place in the middle of the column, wedged between a man with a heavy ruck and another with a radio tucked close to his chest. Her job tonight was not glamorous. She carried spare batteries sealed in plastic, checked that sensitive gear stayed dry, and stayed quiet unless someone asked her a direct question. She was attached as a geospatial intelligence and ISR enabler, the person who could read the ground and model routes. But right now, she was treated like extra weight. An operator ahead glanced back and smirked, just loud enough for her to catch it over the rain. He muttered map mule like it was a harmless joke, then added laptop as if her brain belonged in a case, not on a trail. A couple of shoulders shook with silent laughter, and then the line tightened again. Emily kept her face still, because reacting would only make it worse, and because she had learned that pride can get people killed faster than fear. The real enemy was not a person out there in the dark. It was the mountain itself, with ridgelines that blocked radio traffic and gullies that turned into traps when the water rose. Under the canopy, their GPS fixes wobbled and drifted, and different devices disagreed by tens of meters like they were all guessing. The lead element paused, then moved again, and Emily felt a small wrongness in the slope, a faint mismatch between what the ground said and what the screens promised. She slid a hand into her kit and pulled out a lensatic compass. Old metal, steady, indifferent to ego. Shielding it from the rain, she checked a bearing and made a tiny grease pencil mark on a water-resistant note. She did not announce anything. Not yet, because no one was listening. But, as the file pushed deeper along the ridgeline and the radio fell quiet behind the terrain, she could feel it coming. They were starting to lose their bearings, and the mountain was about to make them pay for every bit of confidence they had left. The jungle mountains did not look like a map from above. They were sharp and crowded, with knife-edge ridgelines that forced you to walk, single file, and steep spurs that dropped away without warning. Narrow saddles funneled movement like a chute, and the river gullies below could turn into flash floods after dark. Every step on wet rock and slick roots threatened to fall, and every slip made noise that carried through the trees. This was not a raid, and it was not a show of force. A special mission troop was running a quiet manhunt for a high-value facilitator moving along insurgent trails. The kind of person who kept networks alive and moved like a ghost. The plan depended on staying unseen, staying disciplined, and getting in and out without turning the entire valley into a fight. In monsoon season, that was harder than any enemy, because the terrain punished mistakes immediately. They moved in a controlled file, with a lead element feeling out the route and rear security watching the back trail. Everyone spaced just enough to move, but close enough to stay connected. Noise discipline was constant, so hand signals did the talking, and heads stayed low whenever the line crossed a ridge. The mountains chewed up radio signals, and the canopy dulled everything, including sound, sight, and confidence. Even their GPS fixes were not clean, drifting under the trees so the digital picture never felt fully trustworthy. CW2, Emily Knox Carter was there, because when the ground turns hostile, navigation becomes survival. She was a United States Army warrant officer and a geospatial intelligence and ISR enabler attached to support route modeling and terrain analysis. Not a commander and not a shooter. Her value was in reading the land, predicting where it would trap them, and finding paths that kept them off skylines and out of choke points. Out here, One wrong spur or one wrong saddle could funnel the entire file into a dead end with no room to maneuver. And once that happened, it would not take many rounds to turn the mountain into a kill pocket. Emily moved like she had learned to do everything quietly, even thinking. When the rain thickened, she angled her body to shield a lensatic compass from the worst of it, then checked a bearing with a quick glance. Her glove thumbed a grease pencil and left a small mark on water-resistant paper before the note disappeared back into a pouch. She never made it a big moment, because in this kind of place, small moments were all you got. Her rank sat on her chest like a label people noticed and then ignored. CW2 Emily Knox Carter was a United States Army warrant officer, a geospatial intelligence and ISR enabler attached to the troop to model routes and read terrain. On paper, her job was to keep them from walking into a problem they could not shoot their way out of. In practice, she was treated like support, like an extra set of hands for batteries and equipment, even though she knew this kind of ground could decide life or death faster than any enemy. She did not come to this work because she wanted attention. She had spent years enabling elite units from the edges, learning what broke missions and what saved them, then chose the warrant path because she was built for technical mastery and calm problem solving. She liked the kind of competence that did not need applause, the kind that held up when the world got loud. The operators around her carried confidence like a weapon, but Emily carried patience like a skill. There was a part of her that did not come from any schoolhouse. She grew up in Appalachian backcountry where you learn to read slope and drainage the way other kids learn street names. And you learned wind by how it tugged at leaves and cooled the skin on your neck. That was why she kept an old compass even when everyone else trusted screens. Because under thick canopy, electronics could lie without warning. She also knew what it felt like to be the outsider in a tight group. And she kept her voice steady because panic spreads fast. And because speaking too soon could get her dismissed. Tonight, she felt something slightly off, like the ground was telling a different story than the route they believed they were on. The slope did not fall the way it should, and the runoff sounded like it was pulling toward the wrong drainage. Emily did not say it out loud yet. She just watched, waited, and kept the compass needle in mind, because she had a feeling the mountain was about to test everyone's certainty. The troop moved with the kind of confidence that comes from doing hard things for a long time. In the middle of the file, Emily could hear their quiet breathing and the soft slap of wet straps against nylon. An operator glanced back at her pack and made a small motion at it, the universal sign to keep it tight and keep it dry. Then he leaned close enough for her to catch his words over the rain, telling her to keep the batteries dry and just follow along. Emily saw a break in the terrain ahead, a subtle change where the ground fell away toward a drainage that did not match the line they were taking. She started to lift a hand, not to stop them, just to offer a quick terrain note. The response was instant and wordless. A sharp palm-down signal from the front that meant, stay quiet and keep moving. It was not cruel in a dramatic way. It was casual, like they did not even consider that she might be right. She stayed where they wanted her, near the communications gear and spare power. Close enough to be useful, but far enough to be ignored. The lead element set the pace, stepping carefully along slick rock, while rear security watched the back trail and the edges of the jungle. The operators trusted their confidence in their electronics more than a warrant officer with a compass, and they treated overlays and route modeling like nice to have, not something that could save their lives. Emily swallowed the urge to argue, because arguing in a file in the rain would only burn time and focus. Instead, she watched the small things. She felt the slope under her boots and noticed it leaned the wrong way, like the mountain was trying to pull them toward a different drainage. She caught the ridgeline silhouette through the trees for a second, and it did not match what it should. Not if they were on the spur they believed. Radio reception faded in and out as the terrain shifted, and the rain made every root feel like a trap waiting to make someone slip. The air grew heavier, and the darkness seemed to press closer, like the jungle was closing a fist around them. The digital picture kept changing, small jumps and wobbles that did not make sense, and the line kept moving anyway. Emily finally pulled her lensatic compass again, shielding it with her body as water ran off her helmet. The needle settled with quiet certainty, steady in her hand, while everything else around them started to feel less certain by the minute. The monsoon shifted from steady rain to something heavier, like the sky had torn open. Visibility collapsed fast, and the jungle became a wet blur where every trunk looked the same, and every ridge felt like the last one. Mud slicked the rock and turned roots into rails, so even careful steps threatened to slide. The file kept moving, but it sounded louder now, boots sucking and gravel clicking in a way nobody liked. The Ridgeline started to eat their radios. A call went out and came back broken. Then the next one did not come back at all. Under the canopy, the GPS picture got worse. The fixes, wobbling and drifting, until two devices in the same file showed positions tens of meters apart. The screens tried to be confident, but the numbers did not agree. And confidence does not help when the ground will not match the map. The lead element paused, and the line compressed behind them. Bodies closing up because there was nowhere else to go. Hand signals replaced voice. Quick motions in the dark, because noise discipline still mattered, even when everything felt like it was slipping. They pushed onto what looked like the right saddle, the kind of narrow pass you expect between spurs. And for a moment everyone thought they were back on track. Then the planned rally point did not appear where it should, and the trail ahead dropped into a shape that felt wrong, like a dead end forming in front of them. Emily felt it in her boots before she could confirm it in her head. The slope fell toward a drainage that pulled away from their intended line, and the runoff sounded like it was funneling into a deeper cut than it should. She glanced at the others, wanting to offer one clear sentence, but no one looked back, and the movement kept going. Every decision now carried a penalty, because one wrong turn on this spur could funnel them into a rock bowl with limited exits and terrible angles. Then a sharp snap cut through the rain. It was distant but clean, the kind of sound that does not belong to the jungle. The lead element froze and the file went still. Everyone suddenly listening with a different kind of attention. Emily lifted her eyes toward the higher ground and felt the hair on her neck rise. Someone up there had a view, and the mountain had just stopped being the only thing hunting them. The first burst came from above, tight and controlled. Not the wild spraying you hear in bad movies. It cracked through the rain in short strings, then stopped. Then came again from a slightly different spot, like whoever was shooting knew exactly what they were doing. The lead element threw a hard stop signal and the whole file locked in place. Bodies dropped behind rock and thick roots, shoulders pressing into wet earth as everyone tried to disappear. Nobody dumped rounds into the dark. They stayed small and quiet, peeking just enough to find the threat line without turning themselves into targets. In a close terrain bowl, noise and muzzle flash can make things worse. And the jungle has a way of throwing sound back at you in the wrong direction. The problem was the ground under them. A rock bowl forming like a cupped hand with steep sides and only a few narrow exits. If they pushed deeper into it, they could be pinned from above with nowhere to move. One operator shifted like he wanted to force his way forward, the kind of impulse that comes from hate of being stuck. The troop commander held the movement with a firm gesture, controlling decisions the way a leader has to when seconds feel like hours. Emily stayed where she was, attached and ready, but not issuing commands and not trying to take over. She watched the commander's hands, the spacing in the file, and the angles of the rocks, measuring how close they were to being funneled into a trap. And she watched the mountain, because the mountain was still talking, Runoff streaked downhill in a direction that did not fit the spur they thought they were on, pulling toward a drainage that felt one ridgeline over. The slope under her boots fell away wrong, and the way the shots echoed told her the high ground was offset, not directly ahead. Frustration tightened in her chest because she could see the mistake forming. And, if they chose the wrong exit, this contact would turn ugly fast. Emily could have tried to argue, but arguing would waste oxygen they did not have. Instead, she made a decision that felt almost simple, like taking a breath before diving under cold water. She slid her pack closer, kept her head low, and reached for the one tool that never cared who believed in it. In the rain and the noise, she prepared to prove the truth with her compass, not with her voice. Emily shifted deeper behind a slab of rock and dropped to a knee, steadying herself the way she had done 100 times in bad weather. She tucked her head to block the rain and brought out the lensatic compass, keeping it level and close so it would settle fast. One quick glance gave her a bearing, and then she flipped the logic in her mind, calculating the back azimuth to confirm the direction they had just traveled. It was simple math and muscle memory, not a miracle. She did not stop at the compass. She listened to the water and tracked the drainage line by sound, noting how the runoff pulled toward a deeper cut to their left. She felt the shape of the slope under her boots and matched it to what a real spur should do, how it should fall away and where it should pinch. The compass told her one truth, and the terrain told her the same truth in a different language. When both agreed, there was no room left for doubt. Emily leaned toward the troop commander, close enough that her words did not carry, and kept them short. She told him they were on the wrong spur, off by one ridgeline, and the false saddle was what fooled them in the rain. She did not blame anyone, and she did not ask permission to be right. She just handed him the correction like a tool, steady and clean. Then, she gave a route that fit the moment. She pointed out a line that avoided the skyline on the ridgeline, using lower ground and micro-terrain to stay hidden from the high ground shooter. She suggested cutting into a creek bed briefly as a noise mask, moving fast and not lingering low, then angling into a narrow cut that would give them better cover and a stronger position to break the ambush geometry. It was not about charging forward. It was about choosing the ground, so the ground stopped choosing for them. For a second, the operators stared like they had not expected clarity from the person they mocked. The commander looked at her compass, then at the slope, then back to her face, and the confusion on the line started to thin. He nodded once, sharp and final, and passed the hand signals forward. In that nod, Emily felt the shift from panic to purpose, and the mountain finally had someone listening. The troop commander did not waste time debating. He read the ground the way he could, read Emily's certainty the way he had to, and made a fast choice. With a quick gesture, he brought her forward just enough to matter, then put her on point for about 60 seconds. It was not a promotion, and it was not a handoff of command. It was a practical move in a bad moment, using the person who could see the path that everyone else could not. Emily slid ahead into the narrow cut she had spotted, a seam in the terrain that hid in plain sight. It was a small dip and turn shaped by drainage, shielded by rock and thick vegetation, and you had to understand slope and cover lines to trust it. The file followed in controlled spacing, hand signals passing back like silent electricity. As soon as they cleared the pinch, the lead element moved back into the front, re-establishing the flow the way a disciplined team does. They dipped into the creek bed just long enough for the sound of water to swallow their movement. The risk was real, because flash floods in monsoon season can rise fast. So they moved quickly and did not linger low. The point was not comfort. It was concealment, staying off skylines and out of the bowl where high ground could own them. Emily kept her eyes on the slope and the way the ground opened, guiding them to micro-terrain that offered cover and a better angle. The enemy tried to adjust from above, shifting fire to chase where they thought the troop would go. But the troop was no longer where the enemy expected. And that small difference changed everything. With improved cover and a smarter angle, they could break contact on their terms instead of being held in place. The rain still fell and the jungle still pressed close. But the panic drained out of the movement like water leaving a boot. For the first time all night, the operators looked less like they were reacting and more like they were choosing. The file flowed into a position that made sense, and the rock bowl behind them stopped feeling like a grave. Emily stepped back into her place, quiet again, because her 60 seconds were done, and in that quiet, the troop finally understood the truth. They were winning now because she had put them in the right fight. The troop commander signaled the break contact with tight, controlled motions, and the file shifted the way a trained team does when it needs to disappear. They moved out of the enemy's best angles, using the folds of the ground and thicker vegetation to reduce exposure, then pushed to a safer spot where the slope gave them cover. The rain never let up, and it washed away footprints as fast as they made them. By the time they stopped, everyone was breathing hard, chests heaving under wet uniforms, mud smeared across gloves and sleeves. No one celebrated. The silence after danger has its own weight, and you could feel it in the way helmets stayed bowed and eyes kept scanning even when the worst of it seemed over. A quick head count ran down the line, quiet and efficient, followed by checks of gear and radios. Someone tightened a strap. Someone cleared water from a lens, and the jungle kept dripping like it was pretending nothing had happened. The moment felt real because it was not dramatic. It was just a team trying to reset before the world changed again. Emily stayed understated, like she always did. She did not look for credit, and she did not let her face say "I told you so," even though everyone knew she could have. She simply wiped water off her compass with her thumb, checked the needle, and made one more small grease pencil mark on her water-resistant note. The gesture was calm and ordinary, like she was doing paperwork, not holding the line between survival and disaster. The troop commander watched her for a long beat, and the look on his face had changed. Earlier it was dismissal, the kind you give someone you think is only there to carry weight. Now it was respect, the kind you give someone who has proven they matter when it counts. He stepped close and said, "From now on, you walk next to me." And he said it like a decision, not like praise. Emily did not smile or nod like she had won something. She just adjusted her pack and moved when the formation moved, because that was who she was. But the meaning was clear to everyone in the file. She was not baggage anymore. She was navigation authority, and her fieldcraft had kept them out of a kill pocket. The compass needle stayed steady in her hand, and the commander fell into step beside her as the rain kept falling. Long after the shots faded, 3 images stayed with Emily in the dark. The compass needle was the first, steady and simple, cutting through noise like it had no interest in anyone's pride. The second was the monsoon rain on leaves, loud enough to hide footsteps, and loud enough to hide mistakes until it was almost too late. The third was the ridgeline silhouette, that thin edge where one step can keep you invisible, and the next step can put you right where someone is waiting. Those images were not just scenery. They were the whole story in miniature. Emily started the night treated like baggage, a person you keep in the middle of the file to carry batteries and stay quiet. She ended it, walking beside the troop commander, not because she demanded it, but because the terrain forced the truth into the open. In a place like that, respect is not a speech. It is where you are placed in the formation when lives depend on it. There is a lesson here that does not need a lecture. Teams survive when they respect expertise, especially the kind that is not flashy. Technology helps, but it does not replace fieldcraft when the canopy blocks the sky and the mountains block your voice. The needle does not care about ego. And neither does the ground under your boots. That is why the payoff line hit so hard when it came. Because it was quiet and final. From now on, you walk next to me meant you are the one we trust, when the map and the mountain disagree. It meant the person everyone overlooked was the person who kept everyone alive. And it meant that competence, real competence, does not always arrive with noise. If you have ever been underestimated, you probably know the feeling Emily carried before that moment. Think about a skill you have that people do not notice until things get hard. Something you learned the slow way. Maybe it is staying calm. Maybe it is reading a room. Maybe it is fixing what everyone else ignores. If a quiet skill ever saved your day, share it in the comments. Because those are the stories that deserve to be seen.